Tonight is a rainy night. And you don't always know when the weather takes a turn, especially in California. We don't know how to handle rain. And for so many people to have come out tonight, I think we're over 2 minyanim. We could split into 2 minions if we wanted. It's a testimony to our commitment, to our resilience. The women downstairs are having a class tonight as well, and I heard it's a full house. I don't know if this is the reason, but there is a holy energy shining on the valley tonight in California, and I'll tell you why. Tonight is the yahrzeit, the 8th yahrzeit of Rabbi Josh Gordon. He began Chabad of the Valley in 1973. He came out here 50 years ago. The place was a spiritual desert. Jews told him to turn around, go back to New York. Nothing for him to do here. And with the Rebbe's blessings and lots of failures in the beginning, he succeeded beyond belief, not only to open up his own Chabad in Encino, but then to found 27 centers in his own lifetime, 27 separate centers in the valley, all with his vision and leadership. Today, many of you study with him. He has online classes. He was a pioneer in that area. Before Chabad rabbis were doing this, he live streamed his Chumash classes, his Tanya classes, his Rambam classes, and millions, literally, this is not a joke, millions of people have been impacted, are being impacted on the daily because of his work. And so, I don't know Hashem's ways, but if there's a reason why the classes tonight, both the men and the women in Sherman Oaks are so full, it's definitely because his neshama is pulling strings. And we should say a special l'chaim for his neshama, Rabbi Yoshua ben Yamin ben Shalom Dov Ber. His neshama should have an aliyah. He should be a good intercessor for his family and for all of us and for all Jews around the world. L'chaim. We are today on chapter 1, part 2, but we're not going to start the class before we thank the sponsor tonight, and that's you. Evan, thank you.
You're welcome.
The reason we have these classes going is partially because I prepare, but also because somebody steps up each week to support the food, the physical food, which makes us keep coming back. I never fool myself into thinking that everybody comes back for the classes. If we stopped serving food, I know what would happen. It would go from 20 to 10 to 5 to 1. So thank you very much for doing that. Next week, Jeff has stepped up. I don't know what people's plans are next week. It is Valentine's Day. It's not a Jewish day, but it's just something to be aware of.
Saint Valentine's.
And we're going to be having the class as usual. Whoever can make it is definitely invited. Whoever cannot, we'll see you the week after. So Jeff is on for next week. If anybody wants to step up in 2 weeks from now, I'm looking for a sponsor there. In 3 weeks, I believe in 3 weeks, no, 2 and 3 weeks are still open. In 4 weeks, I'll be in Eretz Yisrael, God willing, so we're going to miss.
I'll do 2 weeks.
You'll do 2 weeks from now. Thank you. Beautiful.
How long will you be in Israel for?
I'll be there just for a week. Yeah, just to visit my wife's family, and we'll be there for a short time.
Sponsor at Talila's father's yahrzeit coming up soon.
Okay. We should make a calendar online where you can just log in and choose the dates that work for your birthday, for your yahrzeit, for your wife's birthday, this and that.
Maybe you should start an LL type of bidding war.
A bidding war? Halavai, we should have a bidding war. L'chaim. Slava, welcome. This man just did a podcast. Maybe we can talk about it later, but a whole thing. Basically Chassidus. That's the bottom line. He couched it in worldly terminology, but the bottom line is he was feeding the world Chassidus, and that's what counts. Anyway, we always start with a word from the sponsor, so please, Evan, something from the heart for the Jews to enjoy.
It's a pleasure to sponsor the Tanya class tonight. Like I always attribute my prayers dedicated to the loving memory of my daughter Marissa.
Yes.
And Rabbi Gordon's yahrzeit. And that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Okay. No doubt that your daughter's neshama is here with us as we study. Every time Jews study or do a mitzvah, there's nothing that can compare to that for the elevation of a soul that has departed from this world. That's how it maintains connection with its family and community in this world, is by perpetuating its memory through Torah and mitzvah. So thank you again.
Thank you.
If you have the practical Tanya, we're on page 36. I promised during this round to do a page of Tanya a week. In this book, we're going much more than a page a week, so it makes us feel like we're covering more ground. Yeah, if you have your own copy, if you're not, you can just share it.
Double chai.
Double chai. Talking about life. The way I see it, we're going to be learning tonight some of the most important lines in all of the Tanya. The Tanya, of course, is a fundamental Chassidic classic, but there are some chapters that are my favorite, and then there are some lines that are critical and integral to the entirety of this work. And one of those select few lines is in the second half of chapter 1. The Tanya is called the Book of the Benoni. The word Benoni means average, in-betweener, mediocre, ordinary. Yesterday we began the discussion of the Tanya's three personalities, the Tzaddik, the Benoni, the Rasha. And we're going to be returning to them in some time. We don't know exactly how the Tanya defines them yet, but we do know that we're definitely not defining them by their actions and behavior. It's not what you do, it's who you are. The laser focus is going to zoom into the Benoni, because that's the man that we can become. The Tzaddik and Rasha are incidental to the Tanya's main focus. But to get there, to truly appreciate what it is that a Benoni stands for, strives for, and the way he needs to live his life, we need to back up a little bit and have a conversation on the essence of a Jew. What is the makeup? What is the psyche of the Jewish person? That's where we're headed for the next while, until the end of chapter 8. We're not going to be hearing Tzaddik, Benoni, Rasha. You can shelve those terminologies. They're going to come back later. Now we're backing up. I don't care if you're a Tzaddik or a Rasha or a Benoni, you're a Jew. And so before we can give you a title, we need to understand your essence. And to do that, the Alter Rebbe introduces the concept of the two souls. Let's read it inside, just those lines, and then we'll expand and explain a little bit. The bottom of 36. Right there by the second to last paragraph. The Alter Rebbe says, now that it is clear, we are speaking of an inner psychological distinction that distinguishes the Benoni from the Tzaddik. That was last week's discussion at length. Let us turn to an explanation of this matter from Kabbalistic sources, which illuminate the inner workings of man. The following is based on what Rabbi Chaim Vital of blessed memory writes in Sharei HaKedusha, and in Eitz Chaim, section 50, chapter 2. Rabbi Chaim Vital was a student of the Arizal. The Arizal is considered to be one of the forefathers of Kabbalah. He never wrote his teachings. Very interesting situation. He only spoke orally. He had students who would transcribe everything he wrote. His primary student was Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital compiled a set of books that we have today known as the writings of the Arizal, but they're in fact not the writings of the Arizal, they're the writings of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was his student who put everything into writing. And they're considered to be the be-all, end-all of the Arizal's teachings. And he has a section called Sharei HaKedusha, the Gates of Holiness, where he writes the following. And we're going to skip now to the middle of 37. In Sharei HaKedusha we learn that every person in Israel, both Tzaddik and Rasha, possesses two souls, referred to in the Tanya as the animal soul and the divine soul. This is it. We've just learned two of the most important lines in the entire Tanya. Why are they so important? The core of the Tanya, as the Alter Rebbe himself described it in the introduction, is a compendium of answers to questions in the service of God. The Alter Rebbe had a bunch of followers. He tried to personally guide all of them. It stopped working at a certain point. There was just too many. And he said, look, I got to commit it all to writing. And we discussed this at length. The Alter Rebbe envisioned every single future student of the Tanya in the things that he incorporated into this book. But no matter who those may be, people came forward with spiritual struggles that they were trying to figure out in their search and in their path to bettering themselves in their relationship with God. And it seems like, because this is a repeated theme throughout the Tanya, it seems like one of the core issues that Hasidim struggled with was, who am I? What is my identity? And the reason they struggled with this question was because they found themselves being pulled in two opposite directions almost every day. There was the part of them that aspired to holiness, to transcendence, to selflessness. And then there was the part of them that kept aspiring, or I don't know if that's a good word to use, to craving, lusting, ego, selfishness, maybe some negativity. And they couldn't figure it out. They were essentially asking the Alter Rebbe, and they would ask this periodically when they would enter into a private audience, am I schizophrenic? Am I a Jewish schizophrenic? And if you read the Talmud and you read the classic Jewish text, it does seem that way. The way that classic Jewish literature defines the two voices inside us is actually using words that the Alter Rebbe himself used in the beginning of chapter 1, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. We have the good inclination and the evil inclination. And that's how we're basically taught to distinguish between the two voices that we hear. When we're aspiring to up above us, that's our Yetzer Tov talking. When we're aspiring or craving things that are below us or beneath us, that's the Yetzer Hara talking. However, the Alter Rebbe seeks to introduce us to something much, much deeper than that, in which we're not schizophrenic. The word Yetzer means an inclination or a pull. A pull would imply that there is one system in place that can be pulled in either direction. It goes this way sometimes, it goes that way sometimes. On the pendulum, it's swinging this way and that way. The reason that it leaves people wanting is because we don't want to believe that we're truly capable of this wide spectrum if it were just one core. If it were just one core, how could it be so holy and so mundane, so spiritual and so material? The Alter Rebbe's thesis, essentially, and the Chassidic position is that we have not two Yetzarim, not two pulls, but two nefashot, two souls. The word nefesh, actually in Hebrew as it's defined grammatically, is a life force. Nefesh, neshama, soul. The word soul means a life force, an animating, vivifying energy. Said in other words, we are living two lives. We have two fully mature and developed systems within us. It's not one system that's being pulled this way or that way, it's two separate systems. We're not schizophrenic, we have a dual personality. We shouldn't run away from that, we should actually embrace it. And when we embrace it, that's when we can begin to control the way we behave and act and serve Hashem. So it's not the Alter Rebbe's novelty. This is a straight quote from the Arizal. But the commentary and all that's going to follow in the next 8 chapters are definitely uniquely the Alter Rebbe's. Just so we get a little map of where we're heading. Chapter 1 is going to comment on the animal soul. Chapter 2 is going to comment on the godly soul. Chapter 3, 4, and 5 is going to comment on the makeup of the godly soul. Chapter 6, 7, and 8 on the makeup of the animal soul. So we have a chapter on the essence of each soul, and then a couple of chapters on the personality of each soul, let's call it. So let's start with the animal soul. The nefesh habahamit is the way that Tanya describes it. The reason, by the way, we start with the nefesh habahamit, why do we start with the animal? Shouldn't the godly be the more important one? Is because chronologically speaking, we're taught that the animal soul enters first. The animal soul enters at birth. The godly soul enters at the bris. at the time of circumcision.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a tough week.
Huh?
That's a tough week. It's busy.
Huh?
Is that with women?
With women. The Talmud says, Isha keman de mihila damya. A woman is as though born circumcised.
That's why they're older than us.
Is that
They
why?
have to get a younger wife, right? Because they know everything.
Either way, they know everything.
Yeah, so I don't think it has to do with the bris. I think that's regardless. I don't care which man you are.
What happens in Tanya stays in Tanya.
Exactly. It is actually not so clear when the animal soul comes in for them. Right at birth, or a couple of days later when they're named, but definitely after the animal soul. So when discussing the essence of the souls, the Alter Rebbe begins with the animal and then goes to the godly. The wording the Alter Rebbe uses in the Tanya is that the animal soul is rooted in klipa. This is a word we're going to be hearing also a lot of times in this book. The animal soul is rooted in klipa. What is klipa? The word klipa in English literally means a shell or a husk. What does a shell or a peel or a husk do for a fruit? It covers the fruit. It conceals the fruit. But it also protects the fruit. That's true. There's a double purpose there. Hashem, in his infinite wisdom, for reasons that are discussed extensively, debated, and I don't think ever resolved in our texts, Hashem has decided that he also wants a peel in his world to cover the fruit, to cover the truth. There are negative forces in the world that their stated mission, they're bent on being a shell. They want to be a curtain that covers up what's really going on, what's really beneath the fabric of reality. And they want you to buy in to the narrative that there's nothing more to this world than meets the eye. That's their whole thing. There is a positive element to them where they're protective, but that's going to come later in the Tanya. For now, we're focused on the negative part. They're just there to block. They're there to block the truth. It's important to use that terminology because what that means is they're not necessarily bad. I use the word negative, but it's not necessarily negative. It's just selfish. It's just not godly, not holy. It's bound to lead to bad in the end because godless morals cannot exist. This is a bigger conversation than what we're talking about tonight, but actually it's last week's Parsha. If you were in the shul last week, they read the 10 Commandments. And the question is asked by many commentaries, why are the 10 Commandments seemingly such simple stuff? I mean, I get the first one, I'm God, and don't serve idols. That's, esoteric, sublime things. But don't murder, don't cheat, don't kidnap, don't testify falsely. That's not like the 10 Commandments. If God came down to give his first show, I would think he would say something a little more substantial, more spiritual. And the answer which the Rebbe would quote many, many times is that the reason we don't murder has to be directly linked to the existence of God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, therefore lo tirtzach. The moment do not murder becomes divorced from I am God, the human mind will find a way to justify murder when it suits its needs. And we don't have to go back very far in our history to know it. The Rebbe would always point, and the Rebbe was, you have to think about the context, he assumed leadership in the 50s when Jewish people were living the decimation of the Holocaust. And it was so visceral, so real for these Jews to see that, and he would always use that in conversation. Look, the second you take Hashem out of the picture is the minute you will end up going down the rabbit hole that nobody wants to end up. So of course, if something is all the time removing godliness, even if it begins innocently, it's going to end very far away from the intended goal. But it's important, as a matter of definition, to understand that klipa is not necessarily negative. And that's, I think, why the terminology animal soul is so apropos. It doesn't say the bad soul, or the wicked soul, or the destructive soul. It says the animal soul. Some animals can be pretty destructive. But by default, animals, they're tame. I think a couple of years back, I told a story, which to me captures the essence of this concept, where there was a giraffe who befriended a goat. And the giraffe is so tall, and it can see all around, and gets to see the beauty of Hashem's nature, and it was trying to educate the goat that there's more to life than what it sees, the grass and that it eats. So it started to lecture. Spends days and weeks telling the goat, there's a sky, and there's clouds, and there's mountains, and there's hills, and there's seas, and there's oceans, and you can see it all. All you have to do is, like me, you have to just pick up your head. You crawl around on four, you look down the whole day, just pick up your head. So the goat says, nah, it's too hard, I can't get off my feet. He says, look, it's not going to hurt you, just try, pick up your legs, maybe you can even lean on me. So one day, finally, after much persuasion, the goat was convinced, says, okay, here we go. Lifts its legs up, kind of pushes against the back of the giraffe, and the giraffe says, look, just showing him around, look at this day, look at this field, look at this nature. And the goat's looking around unimpressed. He says, what's the matter? The goat says, I can't eat it. But I can't eat it.
Selfish.
Nothing bad.
Right.
Just completely wrapped up in itself. It cannot imagine that there's anything more than what it sees and what it can eat. This is why Kohelet, by the way, King Solomon writes, Ruach ha-behema ha-yoredet hilamata. The spirit of the animal is heading downwards. That's all it can see. The reason, according to Kabbalah, why human beings walk on two legs is to give us that ability to look upwards. But that's the human, godly side of us. The animal walk on all fours. They look down. That's all they can see is downwards. Not bad, just totally selfish. And when we say that the animal soul is rooted in klipa, that's what it means. It means if you turn to the animal soul, its identity it identifies with this purpose. I just want to live my life and not look for anything deeper. I'm okay. Just let me go. Let me do my thing. Let me eat. Let me sleep. Let me stay alive. That's it. It can't see further than its own nose. It can't even imagine that there might be more. It's just, if I can eat it, it's here. If I can't eat it, forget about it. What are the qualities of this animal soul? The Alter Rebbe says later in the chapter that it's our lifeblood. When we say the word soul means a life force, it's the force that animates our physical body. And therefore it's the force that animates all the material or mundane elements of ourselves. All natural tendencies, says the Alter Rebbe, all natural tendencies. He begins with the negative tendencies. Let's call them all the natural negative tendencies come from the animal soul. He doesn't mention the basic human tendencies. Those are obvious, like the feelings of tiredness and sleepiness and hunger and thirst. Those are also linked, as explained in other Chassidic sources, to the animal soul. But if we're talking about on the soul level, the life level, the characteristic level, it's the source for all of our natural negative tendencies. And he names them based on what's called the four elements. In Judaism, we're taught that every creation can be broken down to four core elements. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar. Literally, it means fire, air, water, and earth. Today, they have more what do they have?
Neurotonin.
Yeah, they have more
Thermal
sophisticated
Sure.
definitions for it. You have a 96, the elemental table. You have all those elements. The Rebbe said these are not elements that are related scientifically to those elements. Although, with the modern science, we have discovered that even if you go down to the molecular level, everything is divided into positive, negative, matter, and antimatter. And so he said that this might be one of the illusions of the four elements. But the four elements as described in Jewish literature, it's Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar. Fire, air, water, earth. And each one of them becomes a personality or a character trait. Fire represents heat. It also represents elevation. You look at a fire, whichever way you tilt the candle, the fire is always going to go upwards. And that becomes the source for the capacity to anger and the capacity for arrogance. Arrogance, of course, is the feeling of, I'm higher than thou, I'm better than you. And anger, interestingly, as explained in the Chassidic sources, is rooted in arrogance. Because the only reason you get angry is because you think you deserve better. Because you think you deserve better. Why would you get angry at a situation? Because you're telling yourself, this shouldn't be happening to me. Now, one second, why shouldn't it be happening to you? Well, because I don't deserve it. Okay, that's already an arrogance. In book 4, we're going to have a long discussion on this. Or should we say we had a long discussion? Whichever way you want to go. I think it's closer backwards. Book 4, letter 25. The author was spent at length talking about how anger is directly opposite to the fundamental Chassidic principle of hashgacha pratit, direct supervision of Hashem in every single thing that happens in the world. The moment you become angry is the moment you deny that. If you truly believe and we're in touch with the fact that everything is being overseen by Hashem, nothing can anger you. You know, I thought that when I turned to videoing the classes, I might bring less people in. I was totally wrong. People will become lazy, stay at home, skip a week. No, at the end of the day, the people coming out. Huh?
Then you introduced rain to see if people would come.
Yeah.
Testing us.
I had Hashem on
Life
speed dial. I said, come, bring in some rain,
Yeah, the life experience is different.
Huh? Yeah.
Life experience is different.
And also just to be with the guys. So that's the fire. The water, as defined here in the Tanya, is the capacity for basic lusting and indulgence. Water, the words in the Tanya says, "Mayim matzmichim kol minei tanug." It takes water to grow anything. To produce anything that's pleasurable, you need water. Of course, speaking to the agricultural society, which everything is agrarian and relies on water, but even today, water is feeding so much of our infrastructure and our systems. Everything relies on water. So water is the capacity to just basic lusting and indulgence. Air, or wind, like air, is substanceless. So it's the capacity for all meaningless things, all meaningless behavior, meaningless talk, showing off. Showing off is different than arrogance. Arrogance can be justified sometimes. You have what to be arrogant about, you just don't be arrogant. Showing off here is referencing to an empty show-off, where you know it has nothing to back it up, but you're just showing off. Ruach. That's ruach. It's nothing. And afar, earth, is heavy. That's the capacity for human heaviness, laziness, depression. All these character traits are the stamp of the animal soul. It's not always bad, and I repeat that point. Laziness, depression, doesn't always begin in a bad way. So I'm having a tough day. I won't do as much as I should be doing. Or I'll just have a conversation that leads nowhere. Of course, in the end, it becomes a rabbit hole. But in the beginning, it's just animalistic. And then the Alter Rebbe says something fascinating about the animal soul. He says the animal soul is also the root of our natural good tendencies as Jews. Midot tovot. The Talmud says, there's 3 signs of a Jew. 3 unique character traits of a Jew. The Alter Rebbe names 2 of them here. Compassion and doing acts of kindness. That's the Jew by default. Are all the Jews like that? It's another question. At the core we are. At the core we are. Compassionate, kind, doing acts of kindness. Now how does positive jive with the animal soul? How does positive qualities jive with the animal soul? The animal soul is a shell. The animal soul is a cover on truth. The animal soul is blocking out Hashem and only focused on self. Says the Alter Rebbe, there are two kinds of shells. And we're going to explore this later in chapter 7 and chapter 6 and 7. So stick around for that. But just in short, there's a shell or a cover that's translucent and a shell or a cover that's opaque. Some shells, some covers let in the light. Some of them completely block it out. In Kabbalah, the Kabbalah words for this is klipat noga. Klipat noga means the shining shell, because it allows for some light to come through. And then you have what's called shalosh klipot hatmeot, the totally impure shells. Those are the shells that completely block out. They're a complete cover. So the Alter Rebbe says the Jewish animal soul is unique in that it's translucent. Its shell allows for some of the light of the truth to come through. And that's why it can serve both as a capacity for animalistic selfishness, but also altruistic good. And that word is very operative, altruistic good. However, and the Alter Rebbe brings in this point just for contrast, but it has stirred up many a Tanya class, and it's going to stir up tonight's Tanya class as well. By contrast, says the Alter Rebbe, the souls of Gentiles don't have this translucent shell. The soul of a Gentile is rooted in the klipas that are opaque. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says there emerges a very practical difference between a Jew and a Gentile, which is that a Gentile is incapable of altruistic good. These are the words of the Tanya. And he quotes the Talmud and he quotes the Zohar. Any good done by a Gentile, this is on page, you can see it clearly inside here, page 42, 43, huh?
It's by accident.
Is it by accident? What do you mean?
Any good? I was just finishing your sentence.
You're saying any good is by accident. No. He quotes the sources on page 42, 43. Any good that the nations do, they do it for themselves. If you see it on, let's read it inside on 43. 43 is a quote from the Zohar, a quote from the Talmud. In the bold there, all good that the nations do, they do for themselves. Some teachings of the Talmud, such as its commentary on the verse, the kindness of the actions is sinful, that according to Rabbi Gamliel, all the charity and kindness done by the nations of the world is sinful to them, since they only do it to put on airs, etc. It serves a purpose. Now, I'm repeating, the Alter Rebbe brings up this point only incidentally. It's just to bring out the contrast, that the Jewish soul has even the animal soul, by the way, it sounds like, has the capability of altruistic good. But the Gentile soul does not. And this is because even though they're both rooted in klipa, they're both rooted in the husky part of reality, the one that wants to block out the truth, one is allowing some of the light in, and one is not.
But you're just talking the animal soul.
Just talking the animal soul.
So that by definition means that the Gentile would also have both an animal soul and...
So we'll see about that next week. According to our tradition, the Gentiles don't have the godly soul. They only have a human soul. Yes. Now, we have to, it behooves us to give a little commentary, even though, and the Rebbe, when people would write to him letters, asking questions on this chapter, he would always make the point, I don't want to get sucked in because it's not the main point of the Tanya. It's bringing out the other, it's the contrast side. But some commentary has to be made here, and I think the commentary will actually help to enlighten more about our approach to the Jewish animal soul as well. And there's a couple of points. The first point that has to be made is that this statement is not offensive. And the way I know it's not offensive is that if you ask the Gentiles, they'll tell you so themselves. In the end of the day, every act is traced to something selfish. Every good act has some kind of selfish quality. Maybe I shouldn't be quoting in the Tanya, in the Tanya class, but there is a show that somebody showed me called Friends. If you've heard of it? Okay. Once or twice, right? I was fascinated by it because of what it taught me. And I'm just going to mention it quickly and really going to get back to the Tanya. We're in a shul and Hashem knows that I only have good intentions. So anyway, there's an episode there where two of the characters have this discussion. Is it really possible to do a selfless good deed? And one of them is out to prove that you can. One of them says straight up no. The other one is out to prove that you can. And she tries doing one thing, and each time there's a disproof. And at the end of the day, the conclusion is impossible. Impossible to do a selfless good deed. The Jew wasn't in it, by the way. One of the cast is a Jew. He doesn't act in that discussion. It's interesting. And there are, if you look, I looked this up just because the guy showed it to me and I was interested in it. There are articles and Facebook pages and a whole discussion around this. And everybody seems to pretty much agree. No such thing as a selfless good deed. Even if you get a feeling of satisfaction after doing the good deed, that itself is selfish. And so it's always selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually basic to the human condition to understand that.
Is that a bad thing?
No. That's the way I see it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a human thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but as far as you are not hurting anybody else.
Even sacrifice, by the way, even self-sacrifice is, in some way, could be perceived as selfish. You want to perpetuate a legacy. You're exchanging a better life for a worse one. You can't stand what this life has to offer you, so you'll exchange the life. There's a way to interpret even self-sacrifice as a selfish endeavor.
I think most tzedakah is motivated by that.
Tzedakah is motivated. I want to be famous. I want to feel good.
I want to feel good.
These are not bad things, by the way.
Yeah, no, there's nothing
He
wrong with
gives
it at all.
charity, but not for the sake of God.
Not for the sake of God.
No.
You want to feel good.
I think we're constructed, it's part of the human condition that if you do a kind act, you feel better.
It may be, yeah.
Because
And it may be a motivator, by the way. You give, you get, this whole thing.
Anonymous tzedakah is a lot less selfish, right?
That's part of why anonymous tzedakah is a lot less selfish.
Depends
Because you get
what that
something
may
from
be.
it. But maybe you like to be anonymous.
Yeah.
That could be, you know?
Yeah, you're still getting something out of it.
Yes.
Other people don't know.
But you're still getting something out of
Only
it.
you know it, yeah.
So the human condition is such that we're bound to ourselves. To say that nobody can do a selfless act, I don't think it's offensive. I think it's a basic part of the human condition. To say that a Jewish person is capable of a selfless act, that's a novelty. That's not the default. That's not, here's the default, you do selfless acts, and the other guys, nah, they don't meet that. No, everybody at the baseline is made up of selfish character and soul. The Jewish neshama was endowed with the ability to transcend that. We're capable of doing truly altruistic acts of good. Does it mean that every time we do an act of good it's altruistic? Of course not. Of course not. We can fall back onto the human part of ourselves and do the act of goodness that's motivated by self. But we have the capacity, because our souls are this translucent shell, to do this act of positive good.
If it's ourself that's doing the act, isn't it by definition not selfless?
Well, that's-
isn't everything not
so-
selfless? Unless we
somehow-
transcend-
Yeah, somehow
That's
that's the novelty of the Tanya, that a Jew is capable of reaching that level where he separates from himself. And to do that, you have to live a very refined and disciplined life, but it's possible. This year, this Jewish year, 5784, a friend of mine released a letter from the Rebbe that was never before seen, where there was a Tanya class, a group of men studying the Tanya, who wrote a letter to the Rebbe. They were studying this chapter. This is fresh. Nobody knew about this till a month ago. And I found it incredibly divine providence that I came across it just before we learned chapter 1. So they asked the Rebbe, isn't it racism? Isn't it racism to differentiate between Jews and Gentiles? So the Rebbe said, I'm going to answer you with a question. You took the Tanya for granted, right? The Jewish soul has this way, non-Jewish soul has that way. What do we do with a convert?
With the what?
With a convert.
Yeah.
A Gentile converts to Judaism.
But he gets a Jewish neshama.
Oh, what do you say? If he started off his life as a non-Jew with no capability of altruistic goodness that exists in the Jewish soul, so what happens now? There's a magic that transfers?
The mikveh.
He's born.
The mikveh? Oh,
It's so revealed.
oh. So the Talmud says, Ger shanit gayer, ki katan shanolad dami. When a convert converts, he's like a child that's born. And Kabbalah explains that to mean that he is invested with a new neshama. There's a human neshama, the Gentile soul, even a new animal soul. By converting to Judaism, you become endowed with this Jewish soul. So the Rebbe says, where do we learn all the laws of conversion from? You know, there's a procedure that a convert has to go through. We learn the procedure of conversion from the giving of the Torah. That's when the Jews fully became the Jewish people. Whatever steps they had to follow in Matan Torah, in receiving the Torah, that's the steps that a convert has to follow for all time to join the covenant, to join the family. So the Rebbe says, this is not a race issue. Jews aren't a different race. Look at us, we're all ethnicities. That's not the unifying factor in Jewish people. The Jewish people, by accepting the Torah on Hashem's terms, at the time of the giving of the Torah, were endowed with this new type of soul. Whoever accepts the Torah on those terms forevermore is also endowed with that soul. Whoever is not part of that family remains with the basic human condition. So it's not a matter of race as much as it is a matter of Hashem, the creator of the world, the giver of the Torah, deciding that based on his Torah, there's a capacity to have this additional godly element of your animal soul. Now, another point, which is raised about this piece of Tanya, in every single Tanya commentary, this is passed down since the times that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, so it's obviously part and parcel of it, is that this piece of Tanya was written about the Gentiles as a whole, as a theme. However, there are the category of Gentiles that are called in the Rambam Chassidei Umot HaOlam, the righteous Gentiles. The righteous Gentiles who live their life fully in alignment with the 7 Noahide laws, they are the ones that are capable of also being elevated to having a translucent animal soul. It says that clearly. Yet, the Alter Rebbe writes it as a theme, because as a theme, the Gentiles have this basic underlying condition of no capability of altruistic good, fully selfish. And the Rebbe, again, in that letter that I just references again the happenings of the Holocaust. He says, look, you don't need to look far back in history when most of the world was simply quiet as Jews were led to the slaughter. Of course, there were some people that saved, and they are in the category of Chassidei Umot HaOlam, no doubt about it. But as a theme, this is the capacity of the Gentile soul. And there's an interesting story that goes along with this piece of Tanya that I always like to say. When the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned in Tsarist prison for his crimes of spreading Hasidism, he was interrogated at length about his theology and about his philosophy. And today, they've actually revealed the files so you can read through how a man justifies his own movement. It's incredible. So rich, and to non-Jews at that. He's defining Hasidism, not to his Hasidim, his close followers. He's defining them to Russian Goyim. So everything has to be assuming that there's zero background, and he explains everything with just beauty. It's incredible. So at one point, they asked him this question. They said, we heard and we saw that you wrote in your book, in the Tanya, because it was printed 2 years before the imprisonment, you wrote in your Tanya that the non-Jews are not capable of doing altruistic good. How do you explain that? So the Alter Rebbe smiled. He smiled at them. And in his smile, it was clear that he was basically saying, I've explained everything to you. Do you really want me to explain this too? Because I can't. And they left him alone. They left it at that. In other words, in a certain way, this thing remains an essential truth. But again, of course, I want to drive back the point home. It's meant to help us appreciate the greatness of the Jewish animal soul. that we were gifted by Hashem with the possibility to completely transcend ourselves, reach beyond our basic selfish tendency, and to be able to do something with complete selflessness and altruism. Instead of letting our animal soul drive us the other way.
You can take those elements and use them in your favor.
Huh? Yeah,
Fire
you
can
have
be
to.
used in a way that you can kind of
Create
you
heat.
can use it to be excited about.
Yes, we'll talk about that in a later class. Yes, you have to. There's a positive fire and a positive water. Yes. By the way, that's what I wanted to close with, is with 2 points on the animal soul. One is that because the animal has the capacity to be super, super revved up about certain things, so we can channel our animal. We can let it go down the wrong path, but we can also let it go and direct it down the right path. And there's another fascinating vart from the Rebbe. It actually relates to this week's parsha, so I want to say it here. In this week's portion, we learn about the goring ox. If you've been learning the Chitas, the daily Chumash, so by default, the Torah says animals are considered to be what's called a tam. A tam means tame. But if an ox gores another animal 3 times, then it becomes prone to damage. It's called a muad. And there's a fascinating halacha that says that if you sell an ox, if an ox became a muad in your possession, and then you sold it, it reverts back to its tame status. Changing of ownership changes the status. And there's a big discussion on why that is and how it works legally. But the Rebbe says, today we don't have any physical oxen. Nobody owns an ox. But we have the inner ox. We have the inner animal. And we have to appreciate the fact that as Jews, we're born with a tame animal. Our animal wants to be animalistic, but it doesn't want to be malicious. It doesn't want to be evil. The problem is that we keep on letting it indulge. And we keep on feeding it, giving it what it wants, and then it becomes a muad. Then it becomes prone to damage, to real spiritual damage. So what's the solution? The solution is we need to change the ownership. Change the ownership means we got to change the surroundings. Start adjusting, start altering some things around your animal. Read less of the news, read more of the Torah. And give less to yourself, give more to others. You change the ownership, the animal will be steered back in its original direction. Because that is the capacity of the Jewish animal. It can go all the way this way, but it can also go all the way up. L'chaim.